I was 10 minutes late to my own housewarming party. When I finally walked in, Wren Halley, the college girl my boyfriend, Austin Blanchard, had been supporting, was already chatting with my relatives like she owned the place. My parents sat at the head of the table, both of them looking furious. Austin walked over to me, looking completely relaxed. "What took you so long? Wren's been handling the guests for you." Everyone in the room went quiet. Wren moved behind him, almost shyly. As she shifted, her sleeve slid up and revealed an emerald bracelet on her wrist. It was my grandmother's jade bangle. Wren looked down.
"I'm sorry, Lily."
"I've never been somewhere this beautiful before. I just thought I could help." Austin quickly stepped between us. "She's never had a chance to experience this kind of life. Let her enjoy it for one night. You don't have to make everything a big deal." I looked from him to the bracelet on her wrist and chuckled. Apparently, Austin had forgotten something important. This penthouse with its sweeping view of Belmere belonged to only one person, and that person was me. I didn't bother answering Austin. I simply stepped around him and stopped in front of Wren, holding out my hand. "Take it off." Wren flinched. Her eyes darted toward Austin, hoping he would step in. When I didn't budge, she finally began working the emerald bracelet over her hand. She took her time, twisting and tugging until the skin around her wrist turned pink. Then, she suddenly sucked in a pained breath, her eyes filling with tears. "Lily, I think my hands are a little too broad. It's stuck." Her voice trembled. "The more I pull, the more it hurts." Austin frowned and immediately stepped in front of her, shielding her from me. "Lily, do you really have to make a scene in front of everyone?" His irritation sounded so natural, like I was the one causing trouble. "It's just an old bracelet. Can't you see that her wrist is already red?" He looked at Wren, then turned back to me. "Just let her wear it tonight. I'll get you a more expensive one tomorrow." I stared at him. He hadn't paid a cent for this penthouse. Yet, here he was, giving away the only thing my grandma left me, as if it belonged to him. I asked quietly, "A more expensive one? Do you even have enough money left in your account?" Austin's face stiffened. Behind us, a chair scraped softly against the floor. My mother stood up, took a small tube of rose-scented hand cream from her purse, and walked over with the same composed smile she'd had all evening. She didn't spare Austin a glance. Instead, she gently took Wren's hand. "Sweetheart, don't force it. You'll only hurt yourself." Wren blinked at her. "Mrs. Ellison." My mother squeezed a little cream onto the back of Wren's hand and carefully worked it around her wrist and knuckles. Her movements were slow and gentle, almost soothing. Then, she pressed her thumb into Wren's palm and folded her hand inward. The emerald bracelet slipped off easily and landed in my mother's palm. No fuss, no muss. It was never really stuck. Wren just didn't want to let it go. The room went silent. Even the relatives who had been snacking and whispering moments earlier stopped what they were doing. Wren stood frozen, one hand still in the air. The faint smell of roses clung to her skin as tears hung on her lashes, but now she had no reason to cry. My mother took a silk handkerchief from her purse and carefully wiped every trace of cream from the emerald bracelet. "This bracelet belonged to Lily's grandma," she said pleasantly. "She left it to Lily." She turned the bracelet in her hand, looked it over, then looked up. "Some things just aren't meant to be passed around." Her gaze then shifted to Austin, but her smile remained unchanged. "Austin, if Wren likes jewelry, take her shopping sometime. Let her choose something that actually fits." Her tone stayed warm, almost kind. "But family heirlooms are best left alone. I'd hate for something to happen to it, no? I wouldn't know what to tell Lily's grandma if it broke." She hadn't hurled a single insult or raised her voice. Austin's jaw tightened as his hands curled into fists at his sides. He always told me to be generous, to understand, and not to make a fuss over small things. Yet, he felt trapped in the face of my mother's perfect manners and calm suggestion. He knew that it would only make him look worse if he said anything, so nothing left his lips even though they were hanging open. My father sat quietly at the head of the table. He picked up his glass, took a slow sip, and checked his watch. It was noon, the time he had picked for the formal toast. He set his glass down, rose to his feet, and straightened his suit. Every eye in the room turned toward him almost immediately. Next to me, Austin cleared his throat and fixed his tie. He even moved half a step forward, as if anticipating something. He probably was. After all, he had been preparing for this moment for 2 weeks. He wrote his speech in advance and practiced it every night in front of the mirror, excited to stand here as the man of the house when my father announced our engagement. Naturally, he was also eagerly waiting to have it announced that his name would be added to the deed. My father looked around the room. His gaze paused briefly on Austin before dropping to the craft envelope in his hand. For a moment, I thought he might open it. Instead, he folded it and slipped it back into the inside pocket of his jacket. "Thank you all for taking the time to be here today," he began, his voice carrying easily across the room. "We're here to celebrate my daughter, Lily, and her new home." Austin smiled even wider. This penthouse in Belmere was purchased entirely by Lily, with her own money. My father raised his glass. As her father, nothing makes me prouder than seeing her build a life for herself. Then he smiled. "So here's to my daughter, single, self-sufficient, and the sole owner of a home that is entirely hers." The room fell silent. It lasted only a second, but that was enough. The word single landed with deliberate emphasis. Relatives exchanged glances around the room. Austin's smile stayed frozen in place, but the look in his eyes had changed. That half-step forward he had made suddenly seemed painfully greedy. He turned toward me, shock flashing across his face before giving way to panic. I leaned back in my chair and slowly ran my finger around the rim of my glass. I didn't look at him. The mood at the head table shifted immediately. Austin was stuck where he stood. If he moved forward, he'd make a fool of himself. If he stepped back, everyone would know something had gone wrong. Unfortunately for Austin, Wren had never been good at reading the room. Apparently, she had decided that this was her chance to make a good impression, so she picked up her wineglass and walked toward my father. "Mr. Ellison," she said sweetly, "Austin is always so busy with work. I'll make sure to come by often and help Lily keep the place in order. You don't have to worry." She lifted her glass, looking as confident as if she already pictured herself with a key to the front door. My father didn't even look at her. He simply turned to my uncle and tapped his glass against his. "This wine is excellent. Take a couple of bottles home with you." Wren stayed standing there, her wineglass still in the air. No one acknowledged her. The relatives at the table looked her way one after another, not with admiration, but with sardonic amusement. Her face turned red as her eyes started to glisten again. Desperate to hide her embarrassment, she glanced around for something to take the attention off her. Then, she saw my mother's empty glass. "Oh, Mrs. Ellison, let me get that for you." She reached quickly for the wine bottle. As she turned, her elbow bumped the purse on my mother's chair. The purse fell to the carpet with a soft thud. The clasp popped open, and everything spilled out: a lipstick, a facial mist, a folded silk handkerchief, a black Porsche key fob, and a single photocopied sheet of paper. The page slid across the carpet and stopped right in front of Austin's polished shoes. A name stood out on the part that was shown, written in bolded black letters: Austin Blanchard. Wren let out a gasp. "Oh." Then, she hurriedly crouched to gather everything from the floor. She paused briefly when her fingers touched the Porsche key. However, her attention quickly shifted to the sheet of paper. Some wine had spilled on the carpet earlier, and one corner of the page landed in the wet spot. The paper was already soaking up the moisture, making the edge darker. Wren stared at Austin's name before turning to look up at my mother. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Ellison. I didn't mean to." Wren bit her lip and picked up the sheet of paper. As soon as she read the heading, her face showed just enough surprise. "Austin, is this an application to add a co-owner to the property?" Her voice was soft, but still loud enough for everyone at the table to hear. She held the document out to him. Austin's eyes flicked from the page to the Porsche key lying on the carpet. Instantly, the tightness in his shoulders melted away. Just like that, the embarrassment from my father's toast was gone. He didn't take the paper from Wren. Instead, he adjusted his cuff and turned to me with a patient smile, like someone dealing with a stubborn child. "Lily, your parents even have the car key ready. Are you really still upset with me?" His voice was gentle, almost indulgent. I didn't answer, keeping my eyes fixed on the table before me. "Is this still about Wren trying on the bracelet?" Austin sighed, poured me a glass of water, and gently slid it toward me. "She just graduated. She's young and just eager to try out new things. She got curious and tried it on." He gave me a small, coaxing smile. "You're older than she is. Don't turn everything into a fight with her, okay?" I looked at the glass but didn't touch it. Instead, I reached out and took the document from Wren's hand. The damp stain on the edge had already blurred Austin's name, leaving a mark on the paper. I held it between two fingers, folded it once, twice, and tore it straight down the middle. The sound broke the silence at the table. Austin's smile faltered. Wren froze. I tore it into itty-bitty pieces, dropped them on the small plate next to me, and took a wipe and cleaned my fingers. It got wet and dirty. "I don't want it anymore." Austin looked at the torn paper and chuckled. Then, he shook his head with an affectionately indulgent look, as if finding me irresistibly cute in my stubbornness. "You really are getting more temperamental." His tone stayed warm. He didn't even sound angry. "It was just a copy. It's fine if you want to tear it up." We can print another one tomorrow. I said nothing, simply laying the wipe over the torn pieces. Right then, my mother bent down and picked up the Porsche key from the carpet. She carefully wiped off the dust with her silk handkerchief, placed it back inside her purse, and zipped the purse shut. The sound was sharp and final. My mother said mildly, Lily has never liked touching things once they're dirty. Austin glanced at her purse and smiled, as if he found the whole situation amusing.
Fine.
Today's your day. You can do as you wish. He stood and fastened his jacket. It's getting stuffy in here. Want to step outside for some air? He turned and headed toward the balcony without even waiting for an answer. I stayed where I was for a moment, watching his back. Then, I stood and followed him. Austin closed the glass door behind us, shutting out most of the noise from the living room. A cool late fall breeze swept across the balcony. He turned to look at me, his tone softening. Lily, we'll be getting married soon. He paused and gave me a look that said, as if what he was about to say should have been obvious. Wren is someone I supported through school. She's like a sister to me. You're going to be the mistress of this house, so please try to be more understanding with her instead of taking things personally all the time. He looked straight into my eyes, every trace of irritation gone. Now there was only patience the kind people had when they believed they were the reasonable ones. What happened today was her fault, he said further. She should have been more tactful. Still, she's a guest. What we do in private is one matter, but you need to know how to behave in public. His voice softened further. So, give her a smile when we go back inside. Don't make things any more awkward than they already are. His voice carried no anger or accusation. That was the strange part. Austin genuinely believed he was being fair. To him, this wasn't even worth arguing about. In Austin's mind, we were family, which meant I was supposed to compromise, be understanding, and protect an outsider from embarrassment. He made it sound as though every uncomfortable feeling I'd had to endure that afternoon came down to one simple flaw. I simply wasn't generous enough. I studied his flawless face and suddenly realized that our 3 years together were like the wind sweeping across the balcony. Those loving moments were there for a brief time, then gone the next without leaving anything behind. I took a step back, ready to speak. A sharp crash erupted from the living room, followed by a woman's startled scream. I spun around, shoved open the glass door, and hurried inside. The area in front of the display cabinet was a wreck. My mother had placed a family portrait there earlier that day. She had gone out of her way to find the retired photographer who had taken our pictures for years and ordered a custom solid wood frame for it. Now, it lay shattered on the floor. The frame had broken apart, and shards of glass were scattered across the carpet. 2 jagged pieces had cut directly across my parents' faces in the photograph. Wren stood several feet away, with both hands over her mouth. Her face had gone pale, and tears were already gathering in her eyes. My mother sat on the sofa closest to the cabinet, staring at the broken glass with a deep frown. She hadn't been struck, but at the sight of this, her brows knitted tightly. Austin rushed past me before I could even move. He didn't look at my mother or the ruined photograph. Instead, he went straight to Wren, grabbed her arm, and pulled her away from the glass. Are you hurt? The concern in his voice was immediate and unmistakable. He held both her hands, checking her arms and wrists as though nothing else in the room mattered. Wren shook her head as tears spilled down her cheeks. Austin, I didn't mean to do it. Her words came out between uneven breaths. I saw some dust on the vase and thought I should wipe it off, but it was heavier than I expected. My hand slipped then. She glanced anxiously toward me. Is Lily going to be angry? That vase looked really expensive. Austin visibly relaxed. Only then did he turn toward the mess on the floor. His gaze passed over the shattered frame before briefly settling on my mother. A slight crease appeared between his brows, but it disappeared almost at once. It's just a photograph, he said. We can have another one printed tomorrow and replace the frame. Then he turned back to Wren. The important thing is that you're okay. The living room fell completely silent. No relatives dared to speak, as all eyes gradually turned to me. I stood where I was, watching Austin. I watched as his hand held protectively on Wren's arm and took in the calm certainty on his face, which told me that he genuinely thought that he had handled everything exactly as he should have. The photograph could be reprinted, and the frame could be replaced. To him, none of it mattered as much as making sure Wren wasn't upset. And just like that, I understood. Her brief fright mattered more than the family portrait I treasured. It was certainly worth more than the sight of my parents' faces, slashed beneath broken glass. Austin's priorities had never been clearer. I said nothing. However, something inside me simply went quiet. For 3 years, I had defended him without even realizing it. I'd brushed off every careless remark, excused every disappointment he caused me, and even convinced myself he hadn't meant to hurt me. This time, I refused to look for an excuse. There was nothing left to explain. My fingers slowly loosened from the fabric of my dress. Then, I walked past Austin and toward the shattered frame. I didn't raise my voice or demand an explanation. I simply crouched, pushed aside the larger pieces of glass, and lifted the damaged photograph from the floor. "Lily, don't do this." Austin frowned and reached for me. "I already said I'll have another one printed tomorrow." Before he could touch me, a warm, steady hand settled on my shoulder. It was my father. He helped me to my feet, gently took the torn photograph from my hands, and placed it on the table beside us. "There's no need for that," he said calmly, his hand resting warm and immovable on my shoulder. "A photograph can be reprinted, but some things aren't worth the paper they're printed on once they've been ruined." He looked past me, his gaze settling directly on Austin. There was neither fury nor theatrical disdain in my father's face, only the flat, absolute indifference, reserved for a stranger who had overstayed his welcome in a private home. Austin opened his mouth, his brow furrowed in that familiar, long-suffering expression he wore whenever he felt the world was being unreasonably difficult. "Mr. Ellison, please. It was an accident. Wren tripped because the carpet was uneven. There's no need to take it out on her, or to make this into something symbolic." Uneven. My mother's voice was as smooth as silk. She remained seated on the velvet armchair, her hands folded over her handbag. "The wool is hand-knotted. Silk blend, Austin. It lies perfectly flat. What isn't flat is the footing of someone who doesn't know where she belongs." Wren let out a soft, quivering gasp and stepped behind Austin, her small hands clutching the sleeve of his tailored suit jacket. "Mrs. Ellison, I swear I
Didn't mean to.
I'll pay for the glass. I have some savings from my tutoring job." "You won't pay for anything," Austin interrupted sharply, his protective instinct flaring instantly. He turned back to my parents, his voice dropping into that measured, patronizing baritone he used when he wanted to sound like the most mature man in the room. "Look, we're all tired. Lily was late, tensions are high, and everyone is reacting on emotion. Wren and I will clean up the glass, and we can all sit down and finish the luncheon like civilized adults." He took half a step toward the utility closet down the hallway, as if he owned the floorboards beneath his Italian leather loafers. As if he had every right to direct the flow of traffic in my life. "Austin," I said. The word was quiet, but it cut through the room like a cold draft. Austin stopped and looked back at me, giving me that indulgent, tired smile. "Yes, Lily? Are you ready to let this go?" "No," I said, meeting his eyes without blinking. "I'm telling you to leave." The silence in the penthouse deepened. The relatives who had been discreetly watching the drama from the long dining table stopped pretending to sip their
Wine.
My uncle set his fork down with a tiny, metallic clink. Austin's smile faltered, then reformed, tighter this time. "Lily, stop.
Don't
Say things you'll regret in front of your extended family. You're upset because of the bracelet and the frame. I get it, but throwing a tantrum won't." "I am not throwing a tantrum," I said, walking slowly over to the entryway console. I picked up the small silver tray where the building access keycards
lay.
"You do not own this penthouse. You did not contribute a single dollar to the down payment, the closing costs, or the interior furnishings. You brought an uninvited guest into my home, permitted her to wear my grandmother's heirloom without my permission, and dismissed the destruction of my family's property." I looked at Wren, who was shrinking beneath the open stares of my aunts and cousins. "Take your guest, take whatever personal items you left in the guest closet, and
Leave.
Austin's face flushed a dark, mottled red. The mask of cool, benevolent patience cracked down the center. "Lily, have you lost your mind? We've been together for 3 years. Our families know we're getting married. You're humiliating me in front of everyone over a broken picture frame?" "You humiliated yourself," my father said, stepping forward. He was not a loud man, but 40 years in corporate boardrooms gave his voice the weight of an iron vault door closing. "My daughter has asked you to leave her residence.
If
You do not walk out on your own feet within 2 minutes, I will have the building concierge and private security escort you to the lobby." Austin stared at my father, then at my mother, who hadn't even bothered to look up from her phone. Finally, his eyes landed on me. He saw no tears. He saw no hesitation. He saw only the cold, unyielding Realization that the pedestal he had built for himself had turned to dust. Fine. Austin spat, his voice losing every shred of its cultivated warmth.
He
Grabbed Wren roughly by the wrist, not with the gentle tenderness he had shown earlier, but with a harsh, jerky urgency.
Fine.
If this is how petty and narrow-minded your family is, I don't want to be here anyway. Let's go, Wren. Wren scrambled after him, sniffling loudly, looking back over her shoulder as if hoping someone would call them back and offer an apology. No one did. Austin yanked the front door open, stepped into the private elevator vestibule, and turned around to deliver one parting strike. You're going to regret this. Lily, you let your pride ruin the best thing that ever happened to you. When you come to your senses, don't expect me to come running back the minute you call. The heavy oak door swung shut before he could say another word. The lock engaged with a solid, definitive click. In the living room, my mother took a delicate sip of her sparkling water, set the crystal glass down, and turned to my uncle with an unbothered smile.
Now,
Thomas, tell me more about that vineyard in Bordeaux. We were so rudely interrupted. The rest of the afternoon passed with an eerie, crisp efficiency. My relatives, seasoned in the unspoken etiquette of old money families, did not pry or offer pity. Instead, they ate, drank, toasted my new home with genuine warmth, and departed by 3 o'clock with polite well wishes. When the last guest had stepped into the elevator, my parents stayed behind. My mother hired a professional cleaning team to sweep up every microscopic shard of glass from the Persian rug. Meanwhile, my father sat with me at the kitchen island, a pot of fresh oolong tea steaming between us. You knew before today, my father said quietly, watching the steam curl into
the air.
I suspected, I admitted, wrapping my fingers around the warm porcelain cup. He had become distant over the last 6 months. Everything was an excuse about his startup fund, his mentorship program at the university, his obligations. Whenever I wanted to discuss our future or the wedding, he treated me like an unruly child demanding too much attention. My father nodded slowly. A man who cannot honor your boundaries before marriage will treat your entire life as his personal playground afterward. My mother walked into the kitchen, carrying the folder that had fallen from her purse earlier. She set it on the marble counter between us. This, she said, tapping the envelope, is what your father and I were reviewing before you arrived. I looked at the paperwork. The co-ownership deed application? Austin had the audacity to contact our family attorney 2 weeks ago, my mother said, her eyes flashing with cold amusement. He claimed you were, too, busy with your design firm to handle the administrative paperwork and asked that the deed transfer and premarital property registration be handled simultaneously. He even requested that the corporate garage lease for the Porsche 911 be registered under his consulting firm's name for tax advantages. I stared at the documents, a hollow laugh escaping my chest.
He really thought
he could orchestrate the entire thing without me knowing. He thought we were eager to marry you off, my father said bluntly. He thought our politeness was weakness. A boy raised on modest means who gets a taste of high society often confuses proximity to wealth with the possession of it. What about his consulting firm? I asked, my mind clicking into analytical
gear.
Over the last 3 years, I had not only introduced Austin to my father's business associates, but I had also funneled 3 major corporate interior design contracts to his branding agency. My father took a slow sip of tea. Tomorrow morning, our corporate counsel will begin a full review of all joint ventures and vendor contracts tied to Blanchard Media. If there are any ambiguities, they will be terminated under standard convenience clauses. Don't do it just for revenge, I said, looking at him. This isn't revenge, Lily, my mother replied, reaching over to squeeze my hand. It's hygiene. When you discover rot in the floorboards, you don't negotiate with the termites. You rip them out. After my parents left that evening, I sat alone in the vast, quiet penthouse. The city lights of Belmere stretched out below my floor-to-ceiling windows like a carpet of fallen stars. For 3 years, I had imagined sharing this view with Austin, envisioning quiet mornings with coffee and late nights discussing our dreams. I pulled out my laptop and logged into my bank accounts. I had given Austin a secondary card on one of my platinum business accounts 6 months ago to handle shared entertainment and client dinners. I had never scrutinized the monthly statements, simply authorizing the automatic payments from my corporate account. Now, I downloaded the last 12 months of itemized transactions. The numbers told a story far more humiliating than the scene in the living room. $3,000 at a boutique hotel downtown, $800 at a high-end salon, $1,200 for a designer leather backpack, the exact one Wren had been wearing over her shoulder when she arrived at my party. Bi-weekly grocery deliveries sent to an apartment address near the university campus. Austin hadn't just been supporting Wren with his own modest mentorship stipend. He had been funding her entire collegiate lifestyle using my credit card, all while telling me that I was cold, materialistic, and needed to learn how to be more generous. I closed the laptop, took a deep breath, and picked up my phone. I didn't call Austin. I called my bank and canceled the card immediately. Then I dialed the building management office and requested an immediate change of the electronic lock codes on the penthouse door, the private elevator access, and the underground parking
Gate.
When I finally went to bed in the master suite, the sheets were crisp and cool. For the first time in months, my chest didn't feel constricted by an invisible
Weight.
Austin spent the night at a business hotel near the city center, thoroughly convinced that by morning, Lily would be blowing up his phone with tearful apologies. He had rehearsed the scenario in his head a dozen times while sitting on the edge of the hotel bed, listening to Wren softly crying in the bathroom. She'll realize how harsh her parents were, he thought, loosening his tie. She'll realize that she humiliated me in front of her entire family. She'll send flowers, or at least a long text explaining that she was under too much stress. I'll make her wait 24 hours before I reply. She needs to understand that I won't be pushed around just because her father has a few million more in the bank than mine. Austin. Wren emerged from the bathroom, her eyes red and puffy, wearing one of his oversized dress shirts. She looked small, fragile, and utterly helpless. Are you sure Lily won't hate me forever? She whispered, sitting beside him and resting her head against his shoulder. I feel so terrible. If I hadn't dropped that frame, none of this would have happened. It's all my fault. It's not your fault, Austin said firmly, putting an arm around her.
Lily is spoiled.
She grew up with a silver spoon and thinks the world revolves around her emotions. She doesn't understand what real struggle is. You were just trying
To help.
She looked at me like I was a thief, Wren murmured, a fresh tear trailing down her cheek. When your mother took that bracelet off my hand, it felt like she was stripping away my dignity. Austin's jaw tightened. Mrs. Ellison is an elitist snob.
Don't worry about
them, Wren. Once Lily and I get married, we'll set our own rules. You're going to be my executive assistant at the new office. You won't ever have to bow your head to people like them again. Wren smiled through her tears, snuggling closer into his chest. You're so good to me, Austin. I don't know what I'd do without you. Austin stroked her hair, feeling a surge of masculine pride. This was what a woman was supposed to be, appreciative, admiring, and reliant on his strength. Lily had always been too independent, too sharp, too quick to question his business decisions or point out flaws in his marketing plans. Being around Lily felt like taking an exam he hadn't studied for. Being around Wren made him feel like a king. The next morning, Austin woke up at 8 o'clock, fully expecting a flood of missed calls. He picked up his phone from the nightstand. There were 0 missed calls from Lily. There were no text messages from her either. There was, however, a notification from his banking app. Card ending in 4082 has been revoked by the primary account holder. Austin frowned, sitting up abruptly. What the hell? He quickly opened his mobile wallet and tried to order breakfast through room service. The transaction was declined immediately. Petty, Austin muttered under his breath, tossing the phone onto the bed. Childish and petty. He decided to go directly to his office. He was the managing director of Blanchard Media, a boutique branding firm. Even if Lily was playing financial hardball with her personal cards, his company was doing well. He had recently signed 2 major retainer contracts with architectural firms connected to the Ellison network. He arrived at the office building in the financial district at 9:30, dressed in his best charcoal suit, with Wren trailing behind him carrying a folder. Good morning, Mr. Blanchard, the receptionist said, though her tone lacked its usual brightness. Her eyes darted nervously toward the corner conference room. Morning, Sarah, Austin said smoothly. Has the morning mail arrived? Did any couriers come from Ellison Group? No couriers, sir, Sarah said, her voice dropping. But Mr. Vance is in the boardroom. He's been waiting for you since 8:30, with 2 auditors. Austin's stomach dropped. Julian Vance was the senior partner who owned 60% of Blanchard Media. He was also a longtime associate of Lily's father. Austin straightened his cuffs, pasted on a confident smile, and walked toward the boardroom. Wren, wait at my desk. I'll handle this. He pushed open the frosted glass door. Julian, good morning. I didn't know we had an executive meeting scheduled for today. Julian Vance didn't return the smile. He was a man in his late 50s with silver hair and cold, calculating gray eyes. Beside him sat two men with open laptops and thick binders of financial spreadsheets. Sit down, Austin, Julian said quietly. Austin pulled out a leather chair and sat. What's going on? Is there an issue with the quarterly projections? Julian slid a manila folder across the table. At 7 this morning, I received a formal notice from Ellison Development. They are terminating their master marketing retainer with Blanchard Media effective immediately. Austin felt the blood drain from his face.
What? They can't do that. We have a
3-year exclusivity clause. Under Section 14B of the master agreement, Julian said coldly, the client reserves the right to terminate without penalty in the event of ethical misconduct, conflict of interest, or unauthorized subcontracting by the managing director. What ethical misconduct? Austin protested, his voice rising in panic. This is a personal dispute between Lily and me. It has nothing to do with corporate operations. Julian leaned forward, his hands resting flat on the mahogany table. Is that so? Then perhaps you can explain why $85,000 from the Ellison marketing budget was billed to a shell consultancy named Halley Creative Solutions over the last 4 months. Austin froze. The room seemed to tilt beneath him. That was for freelance digital marketing. Austin stammered, his palms sweating. Wren Halley is a talented designer. She did demographic research on student lifestyle trends. Wren Halley is a 22-year-old literature graduate with no portfolio, no business license, and an address listed at an apartment you co-signed, Julian said, his voice dripping with disgust. The auditors went through her submitted deliverables this morning. They are copies of public Pinterest boards and plagiarized blog posts from 2019. Julian, listen to me. No, Austin, you listen to me, Julian said, standing up. The Ellison Group accounts represent 42% of this firm's annual revenue. Because of your gross negligence and blatant self-dealing, we have lost that business. Furthermore, Mr. Ellison's legal team has informed me that if we do not remove you as managing director and demand full restitution of the misappropriated funds, they will file a formal complaint with the State Commerce Commission for corporate fraud. Austin felt as though the air had been sucked from his lungs. You're firing me? I'm giving you 30 minutes to pack your personal belongings, Julian said, his voice entirely devoid of emotion. The firm will hold your remaining equity stake in escrow pending the outcome of the forensic audit. If the missing funds exceed your equity, our lawyers will see you in court. Julian turned and walked out of the room, leaving the two auditors typing silently on their keyboards. 30 minutes later, Austin stood on the sidewalk outside the office tower, carrying a single cardboard box containing his personal desk items. Wren stood beside him, clutching her designer bag, her eyes wide with shock and
fear.
Austin, what happened? She asked, her voice trembling. Why did they take your keycard? What did Mr. Vance say? Shut up for a minute, Wren. Austin snapped, his voice sharp and ragged. Wren flinched, staring at him as if he had slapped her. She had never heard him speak in that tone before. Austin immediately regretted the outburst, but the panic clawing at his chest was overwhelming. In less than 24 hours, he had lost his future penthouse, his luxury car lease, his high-paying executive position, and his social standing. His entire existence had been built on the assumption that Lily's wealth was an ocean he could fish from indefinitely. She's trying to destroy me, he realized with a sudden, violent clarity. She wants to see me crawl. She wants me on my knees begging for mercy, so she can feel powerful. He set the box down on the concrete, pulled out his phone, and dialed Lily's direct number. The call went straight to voicemail. The number you have dialed is currently not accepting incoming calls. He dialed her office line at Ellison Interior Architecture. Ellison Architecture. How may I direct your call? A professional receptionist answered. Put me through to Lily Ellison. This is Austin Blanchard. A brief pause followed. I'm sorry, Mr. Blanchard. Ms. Ellison is currently in a client consultation and has left strict instructions that she is unavailable for personal calls. Tell her it's an emergency, Austin shouted, drawing stares from passing pedestrians. Tell her that if she doesn't take this call, I'm coming to her office right now. Mr. Blanchard, our building has private security protocols. If you arrive on the premises without an appointment, you'll be turned away at the lobby.
Have
A good day. The line clicked dead. Austin cursed loudly, slamming the phone against his thigh. Austin, what about the rent for my apartment? Wren asked meekly, her voice small and hesitant. The landlord said the automatic payment failed this morning, and the tuition balance for my final seminar is due on Friday. Austin turned to look at her. For the first time, he didn't see a sweet, innocent maiden who needed his chivalrous protection. He saw an expensive liability. He saw $85,000 of unauthorized invoices that were about to drag him into
court.
We'll worry about that later, he muttered coldly, picking up his box. First, I'm going to find Lily. 2 weeks passed. I spent those 2 weeks working 14-hour days at my architectural studio, completely immersing myself in the launch of our new boutique hotel project in North Belmere, without the constant emotional drain of managing Austin's fragile ego, pacifying his endless demands for understanding, and tiptoeing around his subtle put-downs. My mind felt remarkably clear. My design drafts were sharper, my team was more productive, and the suffocating anxiety that had weighed on my chest for 3 years had simply evaporated. On a Friday evening in mid-November, the annual Belmere Heritage Foundation Gala was held at the Grand Asteria Hotel. It was the premier philanthropic event of the season, attended by the city's prominent business leaders, developers, and patrons of the arts. My parents and I arrived together. I wore a tailored midnight blue silk gown with an asymmetrical neckline, my hair swept up into an elegant chignon. On my left wrist, catching the crystal light of the grand chandeliers, sat my grandmother's emerald jade bangle, flawless, luminous, and firmly where it belonged. You look radiant, darling, my mother said as we stepped through the double doors into the ballroom. I feel radiant, I smiled, accepting a flute of champagne from a passing waiter. Throughout the evening, colleagues and family friends stopped by our table to greet us. No one mentioned Austin in our social circle when someone vanished from the guest list after a failed engagement. People were far too polite and far too pragmatic to ask awkward questions. Austin had simply ceased to exist, or so I thought. At around 9 o'clock, while I was standing near the terrace entrance, discussing sustainable building materials with a prominent hotelier, a commotion near the registration desk caught my attention. I told you, I am an invited guest, a man's voice argued loudly, cutting over the soft string quartet. My name should be on the VIP list under Blanchard. Media. I turned around. Austin was standing by the velvet ropes, arguing heatedly with 2 security
Guards.
He looked unkempt. His hair was slightly disheveled, his suit, the same charcoal one he had worn weeks ago, looked unpressed, and the sharp, manicured confidence he usually carried had curdled into desperate aggression. Beside him, Wren was dressed in an ill-fitting, overly sequined cocktail dress that looked like a clearance purchase from a fast fashion outlet. She was clutching Austin's arm, her head lowered in obvious mortification as several high society patrons turned to whisper behind their champagne flutes. Sir, Blanchard Media's corporate table was cancelled 10 days ago by the principal shareholder, the head of security said with icy professionalism.
You
do not have a valid ticket. Please step aside, or we will have to escort you off the hotel grounds. I am here to see Lily Ellison, Austin yelled, his eyes scanning the crowded ballroom until they locked onto me. The moment he saw me, his expression transformed into a mixture of fury and desperate triumph. Lily, he shouted, pushing past the velvet rope before the guards could grab him. Lily, we need to talk. The ballroom went dead quiet. The string quartet stopped playing. Guests parted like the Red Sea as Austin marched across the polished marble floor toward me, dragging Wren along behind him. My father took half a step forward, but I placed a gentle hand on his arm. It's fine, Dad, I said quietly. I'll handle this. Austin stopped 6 feet away from me, his chest heaving. He looked me up and down, taking in the bespoke gown, the emerald bangle, and the utter lack of sorrow or regret in my eyes. It seemed to infuriate him even further. Are you happy now? Austin demanded, his voice echoing in the vast, silent room. You used your family's money to destroy my career. You had Julian kick me out of my own company. You froze my accounts, canceled my leases, and blacklisted me across every agency in Belmere. Wren stepped forward, tears instantly welling in her eyes, falling into her Well-rehearsed role. Lily, please. Austin has worked so hard for everything.
He has.
How could you be so cruel just because of a misunderstanding? If you're angry, be angry with me. Don't ruin his life. A few guests murmured, but most simply watched with cold curiosity. I took a slow sip of my champagne, then set the glass down on a nearby cocktail table. A misunderstanding, Wren? I asked, my voice steady, clear, and perfectly modulated. Is that what you call billing $85,000 of fraudulent marketing invoices to my family's company? Wren's tears froze on her cheeks. Her face turned chalk-white. Austin's jaw tightened. That was legitimate consulting work. You're just twisting the facts to make me look bad because you couldn't handle me helping someone in need. Helping someone in need? I smiled, stepping forward until I was standing right in front of him. Austin, you didn't help her because she was in need.
You
helped her because your fragile, hollow ego needed an audience. The room was so quiet you could hear the hum of the air conditioning. For 3 years, I continued, looking directly into his bloodshot eyes. You enjoyed the privileges of my family's connections, drove cars paid for by my accounts, and ate at tables you could never afford on your own. Yet you couldn't bear the reality that none of it was yours. So you found a young, malleable girl who would look at you like a god, and you used my money to play the role of her generous savior. You arrogant. Austin raised a finger, stepping closer. Before he could finish the word, 2 burly hotel security officers grabbed him by the shoulders, locking his arms behind his back. A 3rd officer stepped between Wren and me. Let go of me. Austin struggled, his face turning purple with rage.
Lily, tell
them to let me go. You owe me 3 years of my life. You can't just discard me like trash. I didn't discard you, Austin, I said calmly, looking down at him. I simply stopped paying for your delusions. There is a difference. I turned to the head of security. Officer, these individuals are trespassing at a private charity event. Please remove them. Right away, Ms. Ellison. As the guards began dragging Austin toward the service exit, Wren panicked. Seeing that Austin was completely powerless, she suddenly let go of his arm and turned toward me, dropping to her knees on the marble floor. Lily, Miss Ellison, please. Wren sobbed, abandoning all pretense of pride.
I
didn't know the money came from you. Austin told me it was his agency's independent budget. He promised me a full-time salary and an apartment. I don't have any money left to pay the rent. The landlord is evicting me tomorrow. Austin stopped struggling in the guard's grip, his head snapping toward Wren in utter disbelief. Wren? What are you saying? You knew damn well where that retainer came from. You told me it didn't matter, Wren shrieked, turning on him with venomous desperation. You told me your girlfriend was a mindless heiress who never checked her statements. You told me you would put my name on the creative team, so I wouldn't have to work entry-level jobs. You used me to feel like a big man, and now you've ruined my future. The high society crowd broke into low, disdainful laughter. Austin stared at Wren, looking like a man who had just swallowed glass. The sweet, innocent girl who had supposedly looked up to him like a mentor had stripped his dignity bare in front of the entire city's elite. Get them out, my father said to the security guards, his tone as casual as ordering a cup of coffee. The guards hauled both of them through the heavy oak doors, and the sound of their screaming arguments faded down the carpeted hallway until it disappeared entirely. The banquet manager hurried over, bowing slightly to my parents and me. I am so terribly sorry for that disruption, Mr. and Mrs. Ellison, Ms. Ellison. We will ensure our security protocols are thoroughly audited. No harm done, Charles, my mother replied smoothly, with a graceful wave of her
hand.
A little trash blew in from the street. It's been swept away. She turned to the quartet leader and gave a slight nod. Within seconds, the warm, rich notes of a Vivaldi concerto filled the ballroom. Once more, waiters resumed serving vintage champagne, conversation resumed, and the world moved forward as if the 2 intruders had never existed. 6 months later, early summer arrived in Belmere, bringing clear azure skies and a gentle, warm breeze from the coast. The grand opening of the North Belmere Boutique Hotel was an overwhelming success. The architectural design, which merged minimalist modern lines with classic mid-century warmth, received glowing reviews in several national design journals. My firm was subsequently awarded 2 major municipal contracts. On a quiet Sunday afternoon, I stood on the balcony of my penthouse, holding a Fresh cup of iced black tea. The city below was bathed in golden sunlight. The glass door behind me slid open and my assistant, Clara, stepped out onto the terrace holding a thin legal
Dossier.
Lily, the final settlement report from the State Commerce Board arrived, Clara said, handing me the folder. I opened it and scanned the summary. The forensic audit of Blanchard Media had concluded. Austin Blanchard had been found personally liable for $85,000 in misappropriated funds, along with substantial penalties for corporate fraud. To avoid criminal charges, his parents had been forced to take out a second mortgage on their suburban home to pay the restitution to Julian Vance's firm. Austin's professional reputation in Belmere was entirely destroyed. With his name permanently flagged on industry databases, no marketing or design agency in the state would hire him. The last report from our legal team indicated that he had relocated to a small industrial town 200 miles away, working as an entry-level sales clerk at a used car dealership. As for Wren Halley, the university's academic review board had discovered that her graduation portfolio contained plagiarized corporate materials from Ellison Development. Her honors distinction had been formally revoked, and she had been expelled from the postgraduate internship registry. Last Clara heard, she had moved back to her hometown to work at a local call center. I closed the dossier and handed it back to Clara. Archive it, I said simply. There's no need to track them anymore. Understood, Clara smiled. Oh, by the way, the master framer delivered the package this morning. It's in the living room. I walked back inside the penthouse. Sitting atop the display cabinet where the shattered frame had once fallen was a brand new, handcrafted mahogany frame. Inside was a freshly taken photograph from last month's hotel opening. My father, my mother, and me, standing together beneath the bright morning sun, our smiles relaxed, confident, and genuine. There were no cracks in the glass. There were no uninvited guests lurking in the corners. The emerald jade bangle on my wrist clicked softly against the wood as I adjusted the frame so it sat perfectly straight against the wall. I stepped back, admiring the view. The penthouse was quiet, filled only with the soft melody of music playing from the integrated sound system and the gentle rustle of the summer breeze through the open balcony doors. This home belonged to me. My future belonged to me. And some things I knew with absolute certainty were never meant to be shared.